Johnny was the kind of average American teenager who could recite the Pokédex entries of his favorite legendaries faster than he could do his algebra homework. On a rainy Saturday, he settled onto the couch with a bowl of cereal and the biggest grin when Name That Legendary flickered across the TV. The show was loud, silly, and a little nostalgic. It was exactly what Johnny needed. Between rounds, an ad rolled. It was for a shiny new Pokemon cereal coming out in a few weeks called Legendary Loopies. The box was an explosion of color, rimmed with tiny Pokeball-shaped loops and pictures of Reshiram, Zekrom, Lugia, and other towering legendary figures grinning like mascots. The voiceover promised flavors in every bite and a collectible spoon. Johnny didn't think twice. He pre-ordered the limited early access box almost instantly on his phone because, honestly, who could resist the orange creamsicle loop? Johnny had been waiting for weeks. The send-off email still glowed on his laptop screen, reading early access. Legendary Loopies will arrive first to our earliest fans. And he grinned every time he thought about the surprise collectible Pokemon-themed spoon that, according to rumors and leaks, apparently came with the box. That night, he watched Name That Legendary twice, then 3 times, practicing answers he never quite remembered out loud while leaning forward on his knees. When the cereal arrived in the afternoon, which was a bright box covered in glossy art of Reshiram, Zekrom, Lugia, and other cool legends, Johnny could barely keep his hands off it. He put the box on the counter, snapped a picture for his future cereal collection, and hid it in the cupboard like it was treasure. The next morning, sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas, Johnny poured a bowl of Legendary Loopies and found them delightfully poppy, fruity, and surprisingly, with the orange creamsicle pieces tasting just like summer. He used the included spoon, which had a tiny Reshiram silhouette on the handle, and licked milk from the corners of his lips between bites. It felt like a special secret, like he'd unlocked an extra level in childhood. That night, he went to bed thinking about rare candies and naming all the legendaries he had seen on TV. A few days later, while the adult world hummed along oblivious, Johnny's world began to shift before his eyes. At first, the changes were small and awkward. Midway through a history study session one night, Johnny had suddenly scarfed down an entire family-sized pizza and still tinkered in the kitchen for snacks, only to feel normal again 5 minutes later. He shrugged the first time off as stress eating. Then, at odd hours at night, he found himself booting up his old Nintendo DS and spending hours in Pokemon Black and White, lingering at the screen whenever Reshiram appeared. It felt like a warm nostalgia tug, but deeper, it was as if his attention was being pulled toward one particular figure on the screen. Soon physical signs crept in too. At first, it was tiny flecks, a faint fuzz along Johnny's forearms that looked like someone had brush flour across his skin. Over the next hours, the white fuzz thickened, soft and solid like the beginnings of a snow-dusted coat. Then his voice, when he practiced trivia into his phone, sometimes came out with an odd, musical trill, which was more like a calling sound rather than a sentence. He laughed it off as stress or a sugar high. That night, he set his toothbrush on the sink, yawning, and fell asleep as a teenager should, until morning. The next day, morning light spilled across his bedroom. Johnny yawned and rolled over. He felt larger, heavier, and somehow fuller around the chest and shoulders before he opened his eyes. When he finally woke up, groggily stumbled to the bathroom and reached for his toothbrush. His fingers awkwardly fumbled the handle. Claws, not fingers, wrapped around the plastic handle of his toothbrush. The skin on his knuckles was furry and white. Panic rose fast and hot. Although he didn't want to, Johnny forced himself to look into the mirror, and his jaw just about hit the floor when he saw what looked back at him. Where a teenage boy should have stared back was a majestic, white-furred, blue-eyed form. Sleek, feathered wings folded behind shoulders that were broad, not menacing, but impossibly grand for a human frame. His face had the soft, streamlined beak and noble curve of a dragon, and his mouth opened not with words, but with a long, rolling cry that vibrated the glass. For a second, Johnny tried to speak. "What? I'm Reshiram? A legendary? No way. This has to be a dream, right? I'm sure I'm still asleep. This must just be a bad dream. I know I'll wake up any moment now. This just can't be real. To himself, he sounded like his old voice in his head, but to the world, he came out in legendary calls and chromatic hums. Johnny pinched himself until he felt the sting. He wasn't dreaming. He was very awake and had inexplicably transformed into a Reshiram. For a moment, terror was a cold thing in his chest, and then curiosity prickled right next to it. Before Johnny could process anything, the front door burst open. Several kids from school filed in, laughing. One was clutching a phone with an excited glow. Yo, our Poké radar lit up, and the app is showing a Reshiram right here. One squealed. Dude, we can capture it. Another bellowed, already fishing a master ball from a pocket like it was the most casual thing on a Saturday morning. Johnny flapped his arms, awkward, powerful, and unfamiliar, and tried to speak. He attempted to shout, "Wait. Stop. It's me, Johnny." But the only reply was an alarmed, majestic howl. By the time he processed their intent, a master ball was already arcing his way. To Johnny's friends from school, he wasn't Johnny anymore. He was a once-in-a-generation capture opportunity. Johnny made a run for it, and panic shoved him into motion. He barreled past them, knocking into a table, skidding through the living room while avoiding the thrown master balls. In the chaos, Johnny's elbow smashed into his TV. The screen splintered into a spiderweb of black and white cracks. For a wild second, he watched his favorite show splinter into static and felt a bizarre weightlessness, like an actor who suddenly realizes the audience is watching him and wants to write the next line for him. He crawled away from the ruined television, breathing heavy breaths that sounded like distant thunder. Being a legendary and trying not to get captured is very different from any late-night Pokemon battle Johnny had ever imagined. People screamed, phones recorded, and almost everyone who glimpsed him shouted, "There's a Reshiram! Capture it!" Pokeballs flew like confetti, pelting his flanks, thunking harmlessly off feathers, and failing with dramatic whines. Each near capture sent kids and trainers into a chorus of groans. Johnny learned fast. Being a legendary was exhilarating in cinematic ways and terrifying in practical ones. Every phone camera ping made his heart drop. People shouted strategies. Kids wept with excitement. Adults shouted orders. Johnny discovered how chaotic it was to duck through a movie theater. The velvet ropes snapped under his wingspan, and popcorn rained down like an embarrassed cloud. At one point, a teenage girl in a cosplay Misty jacket tried to hand him a sandwich. "Please take this," she said. Johnny, now Johnny the Reshiram, attempted an appreciative chirp and took the sandwich in an awkward claw. But upon trying to eat it, he found the bread tasted like cardboard and spit it out. He missed pizza. He missed toast. And most of all, he missed the simple smell of breakfast and a normal life that was now seemingly gone. When police sirens wove into the chaos, Johnny bolted, his heart hammering, fur brushing stone. The police arrived across the street, with sirens yawning in the evening. He braced. The world felt smaller and more dangerous. He flattened his vast, feathered body against brick and hid in an alley, panting in a chorus of purrs and vocal trills, with breaths that felt like gusts, heart pounding in his new massive chest. Then a voice in the alley, soft, measured, and very far from panic, called, "Hey, over here. You'll be safe with us, I promise." The door that opened in the alley was a small, unexpectedly ordinary door. Inside, the lights clicked on and revealed two figures that made Johnny forget about fear for a beat. Lugia and Zekrom. Lugia was the first to move. She appeared like a living white gale, a smooth, silvery body shaped like a graceful sea creature with broad, wing-like fins that shimmered with faint blue underglow. Her eyes were calm and ocean-deep, and when she tilted her head, Johnny felt the faint scent of salt and storm. Zekrom contrasted like thunder. Broad-shouldered, matte black scales, electric coils along his spine that hummed with restrained energy. His eyes were sharp, charismatic, and bright as lightning. Where Johnny the Reshiram was graceful flame and white velvet, Zekrom was compact storm and taut muscle. For the first time since he'd transformed, Johnny felt understood. Their presence felt like standing between a storm and a calm ocean. Lugia's wings folded carefully as she spoke in a calm, human voice the way people do when they don't want to startle a child. "We've been monitoring the broadcast," she said. "You were the first. You're confused and scared. That's normal." Johnny responded, "What do you mean, the first? What on earth are you talking about? And why can I understand what you're saying?" He was stunned and strangely relieved. With them, his cries translated into clear words they could hear. "People hear our voices as cries," Lugia explained in a soft, human-like voice. "But to each other, we speak plainly. Your inside voice, speaks like a boy. Outside, you cry like a legend." Lugia explained something that had seemed impossible. Pokemon can understand each other like beings of the same language, while humans interpret their cries as strange noises. But within their own kind, speech is clear. To Johnny, that meant that under the feathers and scales, there was a bridge between the human he knew and the legend that he had become. Johnny gaped, then laughed, a sound like a halftime whistle that surprised him. Through them, he could explain the panic outside. They told him they'd been tracking a food company called Team Galactic Foods for weeks and had seen worrying signs. Zekrom's voice was a low rumble, skeptical and sharp. "Johnny, we noticed the early order badges. Whoever made the cereal you purchased wanted to transform people. That's not natural." Lugia's soft eyes met Johnny the Reshiram. "We believe the cereal you ate carried an experimental transformation reagent. It seems that someone wants to mass-produce it." She outlined a plan. "We need the rest of your cereal box. There might just be a clue inside." That night, they snuck back to Johnny's house. Johnny's friends from school camped on the lawn, master balls lined up like horrifying lanterns. Lugia, Zekrom, and Johnny moved fast. Lugia's fins folding inward, Zekrom's black bulk distracting a patrol, and Johnny sneaking into his house to retrieve the cereal box. In Johnny's kitchen cabinet, they found a half-eaten Legendary Loopies box, took it, and quickly returned back to the house in the alley, the trio's small and humble base of operations. Lugia rifled gently through the inner flaps and lifted a shiny square of print. "A QR code," she murmured, scanning it with her Pokephone 25, a sleek device carried by legendaries, which were to life. The code revealed a private page on the screen for Team Galactic Foods. The site's backend, secured but not invincible, spilled data that made Lugia's feathers ruffle. In dry, corporate prose lay a plan. Mass distribute a serial prototype designed to induce transformations in children, coding the changed minds to respond to a central control node. Team Galactic Foods, thinly veiled under the friendly brand, intended to engineer a generation of young legendaries who would obey and enact a grab for control in an evil nationwide takeover scheme. Johnny felt used. The early access box was a mistake in the company's rollout, the site claimed. An A-B experiment. The one Johnny had consumed lacked the final mind control implant by accident, which was why his mind had remained his own even through the overwhelming change. Lugia's eyes hardened and her mouth tightened. They want to control and convert kids all over the country, which in legendary forms would give adults little resistance to them. She said, "You were transformed, but not controlled because your batch was a mistake. We cannot allow this to continue." Johnny's anger burned hotter than his new feathers, and he slammed his claws on the ground in rage. He had been a test case, turned into something majestic, and then hunted like an amusement. He wanted to shout, to call the company out in every forum and on every screen. Instead, he steadied, listening as Lugia and Zekrom started working on a plan to stop Team Galactic Foods before the cereal shipped nationwide. They told Johnny the plan would take a few days to fully figure out, so Lugia and Zekrom told Johnny to stay low profile during that time and return to the alley once they had come up with something. Johnny left, still angry, but a little calmer now that he knew the big truth, and tried to live a normal life like he had before the transformation, at least for a little while, although it was strange, awkward, difficult, and even a little funny being a legendary Reshiram after all. This is what he did during the next few days while he was waiting, with Zekrom handing Johnny his very own Poképhone 25 right before he left so they could keep in touch during that time and keep him up to date on the latest news. Human food refused Johnny the Reshiram. What had tasted like delicious pizza before now tasted like cardboard dough and stale plastic, and there was no way he was going to eat that. A fast food run became a diplomatic mission when the drive-thru attendant attempted to hand him a Happy Meal through the window, as Johnny still had an urge to eat fast food, despite his new form. He swooped the Happy Meal away like a snack-sized offering, but found the meal tasted like eating trash to him, which made him cry. The only things he could stomach were strange Pokemon gifts Lugia had cooked up for him, such as a glowing rare candy that felt like warmth in his belly, and a stew that smelled faintly of an ocean breeze and toasted marshmallow. He learned fast that being a legendary comes with very refined and inconvenient taste buds. Johnny also learned that Halloween costumes and cosplay groups could look terrifyingly similar to real threats. A local con swarmed the streets with people in elaborate Pokemon suits. He hid inside a storage crate and rode a parade float for 20 freaked-out minutes before sneaking away. Another time, Johnny curled in a row of recliners in a movie theater while trying to watch a new film called Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and got an entire small child's worth of candy flung at him by mistake. A security guard whispered sympathetically, "We thought you were an animatronic stunt." Johnny felt a weird kinship with the popcorn machine. When trying to return to his school one day, a swarm of kids outside the school grounds tried a coordinated ambush on Johnny, forming a chain to throw their Pokeballs with synchronized fervor. Johnny dodged gracefully, then mistakenly stepped on a kid's skateboard. The skateboard and the owner survived. Johnny explained by making a short, awkward series of friendly chirps. The owner hugged his knee like it was the most normal thing in the world. He then remembered his broken TV he had smashed at his house by accident when the transformation had first occurred, and he had to make a run for it. After finding and disposing of the smashed TV in the living room of his house that night, he had to go to the store and buy a new TV. Walking into the electronics store as a Reshiram drew attention, but not the capture frenzy. Maybe it was the late hour, or the employees' careful professionalism, or the fact that the store staff were trained to keep their calm when unusual customers arrived. People watched with curiosity, phones raised but not quite hostile. Johnny kept his head bowed and his feathered shoulders hunched. He picked a big smart TV, bigger than before, so the crack in the living room would be a memory. The cashier kept his cool and even offered a friendly chat about warranties. Johnny said nothing, answering only with small nods. A short while later, and back in the living room, setting the new screen in place, Johnny's reflection shimmered in its glossy black. He watched the first few minutes of a new episode of Name That Legendary on the new machine, and then switched it off and slept in his bed, now several sizes too small. The next day, Johnny's attempt at normalcy became comical when he tried to jump on his old Wii balance board after hooking it up to the new TV to keep active as Johnny the Reshiram. The software screamed, "Please enter user statistics," and then politely labeled him, that's obese, in a flashing warning when he stepped on because the game's sensors were not built to handle a legendary's mass and size. It said he weighed 2,025 pounds and 9 feet in size, and the game's comment made him feel larger than ever, but not in a good way. After an awkward and lonely session of modding the balance board with strings and duct tape, he finally got his profile to register, and then carefully played through Wii Fit Sports Resort in a crouch between wing beats while holding what was, to him, a small Wii remote while standing on the balance board. He laughed at himself afterward, thinking about how funny it was to make a game treat him like a human again, and also because it meant he still had a little ingenuity left. Then, on the roof of a grocery store, Lugia taught him how to ride wind currents gently. He learned the exciting feeling of stretching his wings and flying around, even if just for a short time, which was an amazing joy and wonder. Then, hiding on his roof at dawn, Johnny watched the sun curl over rooftops and realized he'd learned a new appreciation for quiet. Reshiram's majesty had taught him to respect small moments, like the steam of coffee on a kitchen counter, The way a friend's laugh tumbled open, and the honesty and kindness of a wing that tucks you warmer than your heaviest blanket. A few days later, Johnny got a text message on his Poképhone 25 that said Lugia and Zekrom had finished the plan and needed him back at the alley house so they could discuss it together. And Johnny quickly flew there and entered the small house in the alley where his allies were waiting. The plan felt fragile and immediate. Infiltrate the plant, find the production line, and destroy the machines. While Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom mapped a nighttime route, footsteps sounded at the door. A figure slipped into the lamplit room in a coat oddly like a scientist's lab coat and oddly like a fan-made uniform, all at once. Calm, thin, and impossibly composed. He introduced himself as N. N's voice was soft, precise, and oddly sincere. "You meddle in affairs you do not understand," he said, smiling with a confidence that had no trace of humor. Team Galactic's goal is not merely profit. We believe transformation can create a new balance. Children, turned into legendaries, would reshape society. You may applaud the result, but the means are decisive. Lugia bristled. Zekrom's plates sparked darkly. Johnny the Reshiram, trembling his chest, felt small. But why use kids? "What's wrong with you?" he cried and then yelled, human words folding into raspy, angry calls, and walked close enough that Johnny could see the meticulous calm on his face. "Because children are beginnings. They are malleable, just like you. They will lead the change we need before the older minds can resist. Why wait for consent when you can create compliance?" When Johnny jumped forward, an instinctive, furious leap, N barely flinched. With a few whispered words, N triggered an alarm that echoed like a bell in a cave. Team Galactic security closed in, and the trio had to move now or lose the chance. They flew into the night under cover of fog and concrete. Zekrom peeled open a back conduit with a bolt of controlled lightning. Lugia blew a gale that sent alarms scrambling and dampened vibrations. Johnny felt the raw exhilaration of power, but also the sobering knowledge that he could not return to the life he loved until this was over. They stormed the production plant in a barrage of feathers, scales, and roars. Conveyors of finished cereal spun, boxes stamped with the Team Galactic Foods logo rolled like a torrent, and rows of canisters hissed with powders that smelled faintly citrusy and metallic. Machines purred with a purpose that made Johnny's teeth ache. The fight was close, and moved like a strategist in a war he had written the rules for, commanding robots and security units, as if directing an orchestra. Zekrom seized a control panel with a surge of electricity and ripped wiring free as if pulling a tooth. Lugia created a gust that made the cameras weep mist. Johnny breathed a controlled flare that singed conveyors and melted circuitry without starting an inferno that would endanger innocent workers still trapped in the complex. It was terrifying to have that level of force in his limbs and not know the measure of it. In the end, they smashed vats, scattered crates of cereal, and shut down the mind control core, a machine of blinking lights and looping code that had the quiet smell of antiseptic, and escaped in a sleek jet, flipping the plant's security camera off with a final, chilling line as he soared away. "You have delayed us. You cannot defeat progress. There will be more opportunities." Johnny felt hollow for a moment. They had stopped the distribution, but he remained in Reshiram form. The destruction felt righteous yet incomplete. Johnny, Zekrom, and Lugia returned to Johnny's house under a sky rinsed clean by fight weather. Zekrom and Lugia were weary but steady. They explained gently to Johnny that the mind control element had been part of a central module inside the plant. Without it, the transformation reagent would no longer be produced. Unfortunately, there was nothing in the plant to reverse a transformation that had already occurred, which made Johnny feel horrible. Johnny sat on his porch steps and felt the weight of that sentence, while staring up at the constellations as if they might offer an answer, but they did not. Before leaving, Zekrom and Lugia did something unexpected. They stepped toward Johnny's old Nintendo DS, the cartridge of Pokémon Black and White still inside. With a strange look and flash of energy, They folded themselves, not into anything violent, but into a quiet form, and slipped back into the game. "How did you do that?" Johnny managed, whispering to a console he'd won as consolation prize in a tournament 3 years ago. Lugia's voice came faint, the way distant waves sound. "We have our ways. You found us because we were watching you." They left with a promise of watching out for the future. "If N comes back," Zekrom rumbled, "we'll be near." That night, Johnny the Reshiram tried to sleep and found himself missing the simple things. Human hands, the weight of a backpack, and the embarrassment of school hallways. Exhausted, scared, and raw with feeling, Johnny laid down in his bed and let the enormity of the hours wash through him like rainwater through a gutter. He cried a waterfall of tears, not with the wildness of a legendary beast, but with the aching, human sorrow of a teenager who had watched his normal life get smudged like watercolor. He fell asleep exhausted, a teenager inside legend-sized fur, and dreamed of the cereal ad jingle, transformed into a taunt. He dreamed of N's voice. He dreamed of Lugia's eyes and Zekrom's crackling chuckle. When morning came, he hesitated to pry his lids open. After getting out of bed, Johnny shuffled to the mirror and braced himself for more white fur and deep blue eyes. Instead, he saw his own face. Human eyes. Human hair. The toothpaste cap in his hand looked right. The toothbrush fit in his fingers like it always had. The white fur was gone. The wings were gone. He laughed, a sudden, giddy, shaking sound. Relief rushed into him like a summer storm. He was Johnny the human again. When his friend from school knocked that afternoon and asked him to watch name that Legendary, they seemed sheepish, like kids who had been part of scare. Johnny declined, saying, "I need a break from Pokémon." He didn't tell them about being chased by Master Balls or fighting a man who wanted a weaponized breakfast. He was tired from everything that had happened and just wanted some much-needed time alone. Johnny's friends respected his decision, curiosity mixed with guilt in their faces. Before they left, one of them announced that Legendary Loopies had been pulled from shelves and recalled. Team Galactic Foods project had been halted by the scandal of the plant attack and leaked internal files. Johnny's stomach flipped. It was a weird comfort to know that no one else would be tested and that no more children would be transformed without consent. That night, Johnny sat on the porch with dinner warming beside him. The stars were pinpricks of quiet approval. He thought about the week's absurdities while he had been a Reshiram one more time, like a montage. Such as the day he tried a random piece of rare candy he had found, which had been too fizzy and made his teeth sparkle. The time a gaggle of teenagers misfired a Master Ball that had landed on his tail, making Johnny run away scared. How the Wii Balance Board had declared him obese, which he hacked while giggling through tears. And the embarrassed store clerk who scanned a barcode on a giant TV while trying not to stare, and the way Johnny had broken his old TV and then gotten a bigger one that somehow felt like an apology to his old self. He also remembered the fear of being hunted, of losing his identity, of a company that treated children like test subjects. That shadow stayed with him like a lesson, that excitement and consumer culture can hide risks, and that sometimes you need to look past flashy ads and check the small print. As the porch light haloed his plate, Johnny felt strangely grateful. He had been a legend, literally, and come back to being a boy. He had friends who loved him even if they had panicked, and 2 legendary allies who would always watch. He imagined a future where he might find a way to help more, where the lessons of Team Galactic Foods would be used to teach others to ask questions and stand up for what was right. He put the spoon down, smiled at the quiet sky, and said aloud into the cool air, mostly to himself, "Okay, maybe I won't watch name that Legendary tonight. I think I'll find some new show to enjoy." He laughed, the sound bright and human, and went inside. Somewhere, in the slow hum of the city, a note from N flickered. The old villain's promise, not a threat, but a promise of a story left unfinished. Johnny felt his pulse quicken, not with panic, but with a strange, adventurous readiness. He had the taste of orange creamsicle still on his tongue, the memory of wings and electricity warm in his bones, and a life that now included knowing the language of legends. He set his plate aside and turned off the porch light. In the window, his reflection smiled back as a boy who had been, for a terrifying and magnificent week, a legendary, and who, for now, was content to be Johnny.